beyond recovery. Live your best life, free from addiction. Join alcohol-free host Matt Gardner and his weekly guests to talk about their hero's journey from the darkness of addiction into the light of recovery. Living beyond recovery is to rediscover who you truly are. Let's start the show. I'd like to welcome back to the show Kim KEARNS. Kim, how are you this morning?
I'm great, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for coming back on. And a big announcement from you, a big accomplishment from you. So this past November 1st, last week, you released a book called On the Edge of Shattered. So thanks for coming on. We'll talk about that. Anybody that's listening to this episode, Kim and other co-host of the Weekend Sober podcast, Catherine, was on a few months back. And thank you for coming on then. That was a very well-rated show. So it's cool to have you both on and hear your story. But just for for people that haven't heard it, perhaps I'd love to give you just a period of time at the beginning here to give a more abbreviated, the Coles Notes, if you will, version of your story, your background, and then we'll get into the book.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, Matt. So good to be back. Yeah, and you came on our podcast too, which was so fun. So thank you. It's great to be able to do this for each other. So I live in Massachusetts, outside of Boston, and Catherine and I started our podcast about a year ago, hoping to just kind of reach other people in similar situations as ourselves. We both stopped drinking about 2 years ago during the pandemic in 2020. And I stopped drinking November 28th, 2020. And we both felt very passionate about telling our stories and reaching others. And podcasting was brand new to us, but we kind of self-taught ourselves and have had a lot of fun with it and have met some wonderful people along the way. My story is very different from my friend Catherine's, and which is why I'm back here alone today, because I started pretty much on day one journaling and blogging about my sober journey. And whereas Catherine felt like she didn't necessarily have a major problem with drinking, she just decided that alcohol wasn't serving her well in her life, and it was kind of like the root of other problems, contributed to other unhappinesses in her life, whereas I felt like I definitely by the end was had a real problem. I was addicted. I was hiding alcohol from my husband. I was sneaking it. So that's where my story from Catherine's differs, and which is why I wrote a book and feel that it was really important to share it, because in the beginning, when I started blogging, I essentially did that to hold myself accountable, because I wanted my husband to read it, because there were many, many times over the course of my drinking career, I always say that, that my husband had talked to me about my drinking, and I had promised him I would do better and I would drink less. This was over, the course of 5-10 years of our marriage. And it was finally on November 28th, 2020, that I said to him, I need your help. And it was the first time that I had voiced those words. And that's when I started writing about my fears and my need to stop drinking. And I said, I'm writing about this. I need you to read this. And it was a way of holding myself accountable, because if I didn't have him reading all of that, I was scared that I would go back to drinking. So he was sort of like my accountability partner. I told him everything. He knew, everything that I had done. I came completely clean to him about all the lying and secrets and everything. And I just started journaling, and the words just poured out of me right from the start. So I was a creative writing minor in college, and an English, American studies with an English concentration. And so I actually was an English teacher before I had kids. So I've always loved writing, creative writing minor. I've always wanted to do more with writing, but it was almost as if for, the 20 years that I had been, binge drinking and time that I was home with my kids as a stay-at-home mom, um, all these words were just stuck inside me. And this moment I stopped drinking, it all came out. Um, and eventually this blog, other people started reading it, and it was really cool to see that I was connecting with other people. Um, and shortly thereafter, when I got into therapy and support groups and recovery support groups online, this was during the pandemic, it was all online. I realized that there was a lot of pieces of my past that I needed to explore, which was how I began writing my book. So that's a lot of stuff there I threw at you.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you for clearing that. Yeah, lots of different avenues. I'm just jotting down some different routes we can take here. Yeah, I can just
Yeah.
imagine when you got into the writing process, like were you going back to the blogs that you had already written to kind of cue you for different parts of the book, or was it like a fresh start when you started the book? You're like, okay, let's start from the beginning again, or what was the process like for you writing this book?
Yeah, so the book was very different than my blog. The blog was a very much like a day-to-day kind of, all right, I just, you know, I would be sitting on my porch and feeling, it's a Friday night and I'm like feeling like I want to drink, but instead I'm going to sit down and write through my feelings right now about how I'm not going to drink. And that was a lot of how I would get through that first year of sobriety was, writing about my feelings and my cravings and this and that, and how I was really proud that I got through Christmas sober. I got through, 4th of July sober and things like that. And in writing about it and then posting about it on Instagram and having other people connect with me and feel the same exact emotions and say, I remember going through that, or I've done that too, I totally know what you're talking about, like I could have written this myself. Those things really kind of kept me going. And
Mm,
as for the book, that was completely different. I didn't take blog posts and just like put them into a book.
mm,
While I was going through the first year of sobriety, I started seeing a really incredible therapist. Her name was Ronnie. And I remember like I was 11 days sober when I did my first Zoom call with her. And I started talking to her about just why I got sober and my family. And she's like, tell me about your childhood. And then I started talking to her. And by the end, she was like, I think you have a lot of built up anger. And I was like, I'm not an angry person. And I realized that, she helped me uncover all of the reasons why I drank. Like I knew
mm,
why I wanted to get sober. And that was very clear to me from day one. Like I did it for obviously for myself. We all do it for ourselves. That's the only, you wouldn't do it if you weren't doing it for yourself.
mm,
But I also had my reasons why, and this is the dedication of the beginning of my book. My reasons why were my motivators were my kids and my husband, right? Like I wanted to stay sober for them, because I love them, and I was, killing myself, and so I knew why I wanted to stop drinking, but why was I numbing myself? Why was I doing that to myself
mm,
for so long? And why was I hurting myself? And that was what I truly started to uncover through the process of writing this book. And I started to dive into my past. And so the blog is more present day, exploring sobriety and recovery. And there is actually a lot of that in my book, because if for those of you who have not read my book, it's sort of a braided narrative. It starts present day, the day I quit drinking, and it goes through time from day one, day two, day three, for the first 365 days of the first year of sobriety. But I also go back. So the braided narrative is the idea of going back through my childhood and exploring the events and traumas of my life that contributed to this pattern of drinking. And, from that first sip of alcohol to, witnessing adults drinking around me, to my parents' divorce and college binge drinking events that happened in college. And some of them are, some of these things that I explore in traumas are really hard for people to read, some of them, but I've done a lot of personal growth and exploration and forgiveness within myself. So that's why I was able to do this. But I think it's really important because I think a lot of people don't know why they were numbing. They don't know why nobody knows why they drink the way they do, especially at the beginning of sobriety. And I think it's really important to set off on that journey of self-discovery. So for people that um, don't feel like they have a problem with alcohol, I think it's also just a really good story to help people with self-reflection and looking within, at their own traumas and their own pasts. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's beautiful. So much on the, to talk about on that subject as well. I'm wondering, like, when you were writing this, were there some of these stories that it's almost like the first time you had addressed them, in the sense, like getting them out onto paper and actually, like you mentioned, like writing through the feelings, or was that coming up a lot, or were these a lot of these these traumas, for example, things that you had already processed, and this was sort of a summarizing way to deal with that? Or was there, like, I guess the question is, was there certain things that came up and you're like, wow, I've never unpacked this quite like this, and you actually, like, sort of relived those feelings? Like, yeah, I'm just curious, like, what kind of roller coaster ride was this to get this out and on paper, the book?
Yeah, it definitely was a roller coaster. And some of these things were, most of them I spoke through them first, and then actually, no, that's not true. Some of them I wrote about and then came to my therapist or my husband and then talked
Yeah.
about them. Some of them were mistakes I made while drinking. And a lot of people have said to me, how do you forgive yourself for the things you did while you were drunk, especially when it comes to your kids or your family members or your, siblings and your parents and friends. And for me, I did some really stupid things as a mother, things that I'm ashamed of, and that I, in the beginning, would cry about every single day. But the very first, I want to say it was the first or second day, I wrote about on my blog about one of the most difficult memories of being drunk. And it was almost like, I often talk about this metaphor, like putting it into a balloon and releasing it into the air and just saying bye to it. And that's how it feels when I'm writing, is that I just get it on paper and I put it out there, and those feelings are no longer clouding my mind and they're not weighing me down. Instead, they're just like poof, like out in the air. But a lot of people really have a hard time with that vulnerability in putting their feelings out there. And Brene Brown calls it, I think she calls it the vulnerability hangover. I think that because it's after you put yourself out there and say something that is so intensely personal, then you think the next day, like after you posted something and I'm sure we've all done this, like after we put a blog out there, after we posted on Instagram, or after we've said something on a podcast, like we've all, like, the next day been like, oh my God, why did I say that? That was way too personal. Like, people are gonna judge me, like we've all done that and we've all felt that. And I know friends that do it, will post on Instagram drunk and then the next day delete it, because they're embarrassed.
Yeah.
But for me in the beginning, it was very much that vulnerability, embarrassment, like, oh my gosh, everyone's going to judge me for being so, personal and so vulnerable and putting myself out there. People, I was so concerned very much in the beginning what people would think of me. And I had to really, really work on that, because ultimately the people that are judging me and going to make comments about what I'm doing are not the people that have my best interest at heart, and that it's holding a mirror up to their behavior. And it's hard to to see me behave that way because it scares them, right?
Yeah.
So I realized that ultimately I was really helping people more than I was, than, by myself putting myself out there in those vulnerable ways was really helpful to so many. And I've come a long way with that, that shame, being embarrassed about putting my shameful stories out there. And I think that comes with growth and
Mm.
time in sobriety, because I definitely had a hard time with that in the beginning. Um, but I forget what your question was. I always do this. I go off on little tangents.
No, it's
Anyway.
perfect. I love it. Yeah, it's all good. It just leads me to the next question anyway. So, and yeah, it's really cool. I know you had a post on, and I really enjoy what you're doing with your Instagram post about just like sort of the lead up to releasing the book, and then yeah, dealing with certain things that come up when you after you have released it. And you did have a post on there, a reel about how, reminding yourself you're not in control of what people are going to say about you or the book, right? And just releasing that. So I think I get the impression there's a big theme of like release, like literal physical release of the book, a lot of
Yeah.
release of these stories. You're talking about the balloon analogy, you're lightening up,
Yeah.
and then you're releasing expectation of what maybe people will think of the book or judge, or conversely, I'm wondering how this shows up for you, expectation that everybody, or not everybody, but people are really going to like it, and still looking for the external but in a different way. So I get the impression you're very grounded in, okay, I did this with my intention was pure, and if I help people, great, and if people judge it, well, that's their issue, right? So I'm getting
Yeah.
a real centered perception of you leading into this release, which is wonderful. So
Yeah.
congrats.
I think there's that confidence in knowing, and I've come a long way, and I selfless. I, wanted my story out there. And it's not that I did this. I didn't do it for selfish reasons. I did this because I know how badly I needed to hear a story just like mine in the beginning.
Mm,
I needed
yeah.
to be able to relate so badly. And I devoured every book I can get my hands on. I could get my hands on in the beginning. I read every quit lit book out there. And there were stories that I really did relate to. We Are the Luckiest,
Mm, mhm.
Blackout, um, the Sober Diaries. There was a couple others that The Unexpected Joy of Being Sober.
Mm.
Um, so there were so many different stories and books out there that I felt like I could relate to, but there was nothing exactly along the lines of, a mother similar to me. And also I wanted some real vulnerability, and I wanted the stories that I think some people kind of crave that. And you know, uh just in the beginning, we want to know that we aren't alone. It
Yeah.
wasn't just us being total screw ups.
Yeah, for sure. No, I love and I like how you have this idea of, or you lead with an idea of like, the beginning, say 11 days for you. And it's important, like dates and times, I get the impression are important for you. And you have another podcast that you're the writer for, which is like, it's fucking sober, the first 90 days, right? So I get this impression that it's like, it's important to you to really help people through that initial chaotic period, right? So, and I mean, even the title, I'm curious how you came up with the title, if there was alternates, or was this one that just sort of came to you as far as like On the Edge of Shattered? Was that a very deliberate title, or did that just come to you? How did you pick up with the title for this one?
Yeah, so two things. I do want to touch on the other podcast, but
Yeah,
I'll
please
answer your
do.
so the as for the title, I felt as if so it has like a lot of different meanings, but I do feel like by the end I was to the point of breaking. I just felt as if I was crumbling on the inside. On the outside, I kind of had this image, put up this facade of just like I was had it all together. And a lot of people said that to me actually. They said, I never knew that you were struggling, and you look like you had like everything going for you. And I'm like, well, yeah, I did. And I had all the balls in the air. And I played, played it pretty well, but yeah, I was on the edge of breaking. Like I really was. And I felt, um, there's this image that I have in my mind of when I did finally ask my husband for help on that day. I felt as if I was sort of like at the bottom of this cliff, and I write about it in the very first chapter of my book. And I felt like everybody was kind of far away from me, up around me, and I was like kind of like falling away, and kind of in like this dark pit almost. And like I couldn't reach my family. Like they were just, I was just slipping away into this
Mhm.
darkness. And that's ultimately, like by the end, I was just drinking so much. I was just numb. I just wasn't there. And um, yeah, I was just, I felt like I had gone over the edge, and I was just slipping away. So I think there's a lot of different meanings to this. And if you read the book, you will find out what the bird means. If you
Ah,
can read it
yes.
though.
Beautiful. There it
Um,
is. Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that a lot of people will relate to the idea of being kind of like on that brink of breaking, shattering into a thousand pieces.
Yeah.
So, um, but yeah. Oh, also, so the Fucking Sober podcast, it's actually, so it's a narrative podcast. They've done season one already, which released right around the time that I stopped drinking. It released that winter of 2020. And that was one of the many podcasts that I devoured in my um early days of sobriety. And they had a call for like writers to submit to be the next, to help with writing like the following seasons. And I was like up one very, early day in my sober journey. It was like, I want to say it was like the second week or something, and I was on Instagram because I couldn't sleep, so I was like, whatever. And I saw that post and I was like, I'm just gonna, I was laying in bed. It was like 2 a.m. I'm like, I'm just gonna submit something. And I sat there on my phone and wrote like an episode for in like
Wow.
an hour. And I wrote something, a writing sample for Katie Mack. Her name is, she goes by Mac. And she called me like a week or two later, and we have been talking ever since. She's an awesome person. She's the producer of the show, and they actually won a Webby for it for her season. So her first season is about her story of getting sober. And we are working on my season, which should release hopefully in the next couple months. So my season should be season 3, and they're also working on season 2, so which will go out probably consecutively. So it's exciting, and it's
Wow.
my story, but it's through this, it's a narrative podcast, and it's through this medium of music, and it's just a very different, um it's really cool. And if you haven't listened to it, you guys got to check it out because she does an incredible job. um
That sounds yeah, very intriguing. I'll have to check it out. I've heard lots of great stuff about that podcast and have yet to check it out. So and yeah, very exciting time for you then. You got the book coming out, you got your story coming out on this podcast.
yeah.
Very cool, very cool. I want to get back into a couple. Oh, and by the way, I do want to do a shout out to Catherine if she's listening. Like you guys have a wonderful podcast too. I just remember saying this to when I had you on both as guests. It was made my job very easy. Both have just really good chemistry. You could tell like you're very thoughtful friends and have a very good chemistry of a back and forth. So shout out to, the Weekend Sober, that podcast that you do with Catherine as well. I wanted to slip that in there. So yeah, it's wonderful stuff that you're doing. Yeah, a couple more questions about the book and even some of the themes too. With your background in writing. Let's go back. Yeah, let's even like the origins of your writing. Like from what I gathered from, I was reading the bio that you sent over to me, and like this has been a big thing for your whole life. Like even as a little girl growing up, you had an interest in creative writing. Is that correct? Like, is that something that was sort of like an escape for you and it was important to you as part of your development?
Yes, exactly. I've always been a writer, and um I enjoyed it ever since I was a little girl. Creative writing minor in college. And like I said, I think that for so long I thought of myself only as a stay-at-home mom, and I didn't feel like I had time to do anything else. And I got wrapped up in all my other responsibilities of being a mom. And I forgot almost what it, where my passion was with writing, and how happy it made me. And with drinking, I think that happens. Like, we forget how to find true joy and happiness without alcohol. I forgot so much of myself over the years of drinking, and writing was one of those things that just fell away, um, which is so heartbreaking that I almost lost it, and
Mm-hmm.
it's one of the reasons why I'm grateful that I'm sober, because I rediscovered my love of writing. One of the many reasons, obviously, because so much comes with sobriety. So much freedom is what I usually say. And it is, yeah, there's so much joy that comes with sobriety, and in writing for me was one of those many, many joys, because by the end, like I said, I wasn't feeling anything.
Yeah, I get you. I get you. This will be actually interesting for something that came up while you're mentioning that is like, it'd be interesting for somebody that does have an interest in creative writing, or perhaps wants to reawaken that in themselves. I mean, you are a mother of three, you have lots going on. When do you find the time? Like, what is your process like? Is it like, okay, from 10 to 11 at night? Are you a night owl? I'm just always curious about people's creative processes. So
I know, I
yeah, where
know.
does that show up for you?
It's so funny because, yeah, I do find that I'm such a creative person, and my creative juices were just like sucked dry for so long. And now I feel like, and I used to be such a night person because I used to,
Mm,
rush my kids to sleep, and then I just open my wine and like zone out for those hours at night. And now I'm the complete opposite. Sometimes I go to bed before my kids, but at like 8, and I'm up, like this morning I was up at 4:45. I
oh,
am such a morning person. I love my coffee, and I grind in those early morning hours with my dogs.
mm,
I take the dogs out, get my coffee. It's still dark out, and
yeah.
that's when I do my best work. Um,
Mm.
and sometimes I'll wake up. I'm so weird. I'll wake up at like 2 a.m. I'm like, oh, is it time to wake up so I can go write? Like, I love it
Yeah.
so much. And it's for me such a release.
Mm,
Um, and like, I always say to people, like, if you're trying to write and you find that it's a chore and you're not enjoying it, then you need to take a step back. Don't force it, because it will never feel real. And it won't
mm,
be natural on paper. Um, and then you need to rethink your process. Like, you need to come up with a better, like, maybe come up with some relaxing music, do it at a different time of day, like go
yeah.
somewhere else, like go to a coffee shop. Yeah, because I've been working on this book since the beginning. Well, actually, I mean, January 2021, I started officially writing the book. But yeah, back then, I mean, it was hard to find consistent times every day to work on it. And there would be days where I'd really, really want to work on it, and I couldn't, because
Mm,
to go deal with the kids, or someone was homesick, or, so I, getting that little bit of time every morning just to have that little release, have that little moment to do my little bit of work. Because I know nobody's going to be up at 4:45 a.m.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's really important, I think, for my process.
absolutely. It's interesting. The more people I talk to that are in the sober journey, these mornings are like the number one thing they get redefined. Because I know for me, I imagine it's the same for you. I'll get your take on it, but like, mornings were not something I generally looked forward to before. You know what I mean? I would be like, give me a coffee, headache, like, you know what I mean? Mornings were something I generally dreaded. So now to have this gift, or this redefinition of what a morning is, I'm there, right there with you. Not quite 4:45, at 5. I'm usually like 5 or 5:20 on a day I feel like sleeping in, right? So I totally get that. Interesting. Something that came up for me. So you mentioned it's there's days that sometimes you've wanted to write, but you haven't been able to because life happens. How about the other way where you've been excited to write and then nothing comes out? And you sort of touched on it a little bit, but maybe there's just a little bit of resistance. Do you leave it, or do you force yourself to do like the Stephen King 10 pages a day or whatever it is? Or what does that look like for you?
No, I don't. Like yesterday, I actually had to do something. I had a deadline and it was real. I don't like that actually being
Mm.
forced when someone's like, you need to get this to me by this time. I was like, oh, I'm not used to that because I give myself deadlines, but I'm not used to somebody else giving me a deadline. So that
Yeah.
actually threw me. And my kids were home and there was a lot, and the daylight savings, we're all, but you know what I'll do? I will go outside, go for a walk, get some fresh air. Yeah, exercise usually kind of gets the juices flowing again. And change the scenery, a little meditation, a little deep breathing, and fresh air usually will help me come back to it later. And yeah, just got to keep coming, get up, try again later, get up, try again later. And yeah, I cannot force it because whatever it is that I'm trying to write will not be genuine and will not be my best work. So
Totally
yeah.
makes sense. Yeah, I love how in tune and aware you are of that. Do you have any like writing rituals? Do you have to have like a green tea or a candle lit? Is there anything like this that you need? You just need that whatever to get the juice flowing, or not necessarily?
Yes, I need a coffee. So yeah, I need to
Yeah.
start with my coffee with my like nasty vanilla creamer.
Of
Like,
course. Yeah.
yeah, obviously. And I always play like relaxing, like I'll start out with some like cheesy 80s song. I'm not even gonna tell you because it's pretty bad. Um, and then I'll like segue into like some nice relaxing spa music, but I gotta get myself like jazzed up with like
Cool.
something. And for a
Cool.
while, I was listening to like the Braveheart soundtrack
Yes.
or like Gladiator.
Yes.
My husband was working from home and he would hear the Gladiator soundtrack come on. He's like, "Oh, are you writing? Okay, you're writing. I hear Gladiator. Okay, you're writing. Got it. I'll stay away."
Oh, that's tremendous. That is so good. Oh man, it's such a good visual there. That's amazing. I love that. Yeah, I'm always interested in people's creative processes. I love how you framed it. So anybody that's listening to this, that's like, you know what, I have this book in me or whatever, a blog in me, and they can listen to what you've done with your busy life, and that you're making the time for it. So, which is really really cool. And I imagine your life has been enhanced as a result because you are taking this time for something that you're passionate about that had been dormant inside you for quite a while, or numbed out, as you put it, right? So yeah, super cool. What kind of reviews are you getting on the book so far? It looked like you've been getting quite a few folks reading it and giving some feedback. What kind of stuff have you been hearing so far?
Really great reviews so far. It's hard when you put something out into the world and you
Mm.
are waiting for responses and you're waiting for people to read it. Um, and my therapist, I talked to her last Wednesday. She's like, it just came out yesterday. You need to give people time to read it.
Yeah, yeah.
But so far, everyone's been really positive and really, really great because it's a lot. Some of these topics in this book are really heavy, and I've had some bookstagrammers or reviewers read it that are with outside of this sobriety community, and they have been nothing but positive and encouraging, and it's great. And I feel, I'm not looking for somebody to justify anything for me because
Mm.
I know that I am connecting with people and reaching people. Um, like I said, I'm confident in what I'm doing because I just want to help
Mm.
one person. And I know I've already done that. Because I've heard that people have already, said, I read it in one day and wow, like this really hit home for me. Like I really, you've really inspired me. And that's the hope. That was the hope, just
Yeah.
to connect with at least one person. And also, I always said I wanted to write this book, even if nobody read it. I wrote it for my husband and my kids, so they would
Beautiful.
know someday what I went through and what I did because I love them. So
Oh yeah, that's beautiful. And I imagine there's even behind that, the first step is like for you, it sounds like such a wonderful experience for you to get all of this out of your system, right? Those balloons going up in the atmosphere, as you
Yeah.
mentioned. Yeah. What was it
Yeah.
like to put yourself in that moment of getting like the first, I guess, the box of books and like holding it in your hand? Was that surreal? Was that like, how,
Was.
walk us through that? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was really surreal. I had, since I was in my very first class in college, my creative writing seminar, I had always wanted to write a book. I had dreamed about it. And you just can't put into words how it feels to see your name on the cover of a book. And also and it's almost like those first few pages when you see like the publisher, copyright
Yeah.
into Kimberly Kearns, and when you see your name, and it is a very strange feeling. But I was so proud of myself, because I never would have done anything like this if I were still drinking. Alcohol just held me back in so many ways. And I am so grateful every second of the day that I stopped drinking, just so I could, yeah, so I could get this back, so I can get this love of writing back. So,
Yeah, amazing. Is there some form of like a hangover from this? Now you've had this huge cathartic release. You have the book in your hand. Are you kind of going, oh, what's next? Or are you allowing that space just to take it all in, get the reviews? Like, where are you right now with that? Or is it sort of a fluctuation between the two?
well, I have my launch party with some friends and stuff on Thursday here. So maybe I'll have that little like, whew, moment.
Yeah,
All right. But that's Thursday.
cool.
Uh, but like I'm excited. I'm still working on the Fucking Sober podcast, and I'm gonna be working on that for the next couple months. And I have a couple other projects down the road that I'm gonna be doing. And I mean, this is only my first book. Like I think I have a lot more to say, and I have a lot more to write about. So
Ooh.
I'm so excited, and yeah.
I love it's only
So
my first book. I love that. That's so cool. I love how you say that and a big smile. Was this, by the way, was this self-published? I don't know too much about books as far, yeah. So self-published. Congratulations on that. So do you have like, it's like a publishing company that you've
yeah,
more or less
yeah.
created? Cool. What's the name of the,
Last Spider Publishing.
cool.
And I used them, and Vince was wonderful. He was my editor. So yeah, but there's a lot of different ways to self-publish these days. And this was one of the ways that I chose. You can try for years to get picked up by a traditional publisher. It's really hard when you are kind of just like a mom from Needham, Massachusetts, and you're just kind of telling that you're not Matthew Perry from Friends.
Yeah.
Right?
Timely reference. Yes.
You know,
Yeah, sure.
so it's a little different. But I did start reading his book, so
It's funny you mentioned, yeah, my wife just started. It's the audiobook, so which is great. She usually does books, but she wanted to hear because he's such a funny guy, right? So it sounds pretty freaking heavy though.
yeah.
Holy, been through quite a bit, that guy. My goodness. Interest. Speaking of, is the audiobook?
Yes. Oh,
Yes.
I meant to say it. Yes.
Yeah.
So the audiobook, because I had to do this all myself. So then
Yes.
I'm gonna do the audiobook will be out in a couple weeks.
Oh, amazing.
It'll be out hopefully around the beginning of December. But yeah, because it's all falling on me. Like that's the thing. It's like with self-publishing, you gotta do the marketing, and
Yeah.
it's all yeah, like grassroots approach. And
Yeah.
which is why another reason why I love the sober community on Instagram, especially because
Yeah.
everyone's been so great in supporting and helping spread the word, and
Totally.
sharing about my book, because um like it's all word of mouth with
Yeah.
when it comes to this kind of stuff. But yeah, so the book will be out in audiobook format in a couple weeks, hopefully by beginning mid-December. But yeah, I'm having somebody read it for me, because
Oh, okay.
there's all sorts of like things that you need to do and parameters that you need to like meet. So okay, somebody needs to do this for me because that's way too complicated.
Right. That'd be a whole nother learning curve for you, and certainly wouldn't be out in 2 weeks, I wouldn't imagine, in that case, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Very cool. Very cool. So yeah, lots going on the weekend sober with Catherine. We got fucking sober first 90 days podcast, your book On the Edge of Shattered. We'll have all of these linked in the show notes. Kim, thank you so much for coming on today. It was really great to reconnect. And from my heart to yours, congratulations. Such a huge accomplishment. Very proud of you for whatever that's worth. Amazing work. So that's super cool.
For having me. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you. And just final words. Actually, the one thing I really wanted to tap into, and just if you will, just to give you a little bit of a topic instead of so any final words, which I usually do. One thing that really resonated with me is like, and congratulations on your sober birthday coming up here right away at time of recording here. You know, that time where you had to ask or felt you chose it was your time to ask for help. You know, what was that like? And if there's somebody that's listening right now that's sort of on that edge as well, the edge of shattered, potentially, pun intended, what would be the advice for them? Like, how certainly there was a lot going through your head, and then when you finally did, what kind of advice could you give to somebody that's looking for some help right now?
That is such a good question. I feel like I came up to that edge so many times and backed down because I was so scared of what would happen and so scared of what was on the other side of it. Um, but I would say if there's somebody that is contemplating or scared to ask for help, don't be scared because there's so much understanding, and there's such a wonderful community of people that are waiting with open arms. Um, there's so much freedom on the other side of it. I know it's a terrifying concept, but so many doors will open for you. And I just am so grateful that I spoke those words. I I think there were many mornings where I laid awake at 4 a.m. contemplating like what am I doing? Just in that shame spiral, hating myself. And I don't know why that morning was any different. Maybe I was just that much closer to the edge. Um,
Mm,
but I'm just so glad that I did say something to my husband then. And I knew once I said those words out loud, I knew once they physically came out, there was no taking them back. So push yourself to that point. Push yourself to say those words. Push yourself to just
yeah.
be a little fearless and um, voice your fears because it's there's just so much on that other side. Don't be scared. I mean, it's really
Yeah.
incredible what you can achieve. So
Uh, Beautiful. Great way to end it off there, Kim. Thank you so much for coming on, and congrats again on the book.
thanks, Matt.